It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I welcome today in the studio as my guest Jess Iliff. He's the South Riverkeeper from Arundel Rivers Federation. Thanks for joining me today, Jesse.
Sure. Good morning, Donna. Always a pleasure.
All right. So we've got a lot to talk about. I don't even know where to start. Let's talk about our latest news, the Forest Conservation Bill. This did not make you unhappy.
It did not make me unhappy. That is a fair statement. What I found especially encouraging was that it was a unanimous vote across the county council. And it's important to see that all of our elected representatives here in Anne Arundel County recognize that there's a problem and we're willing to take steps to make progress addressing that problem. Now, they might not have been the giant leaps that I had hoped for, but I'll take progress when I can get it.
You did miss some of the stuff that you were looking for, and that probably County Executive Pittman was looking for. He, by the way, said on his Facebook post, it's been too easy to cut down forest in Anne Arundel County. That changed with the passage of Bill 6819. The bill moves Anne Arundel County from the state leader in forest loss to the state leader in forest protection. That's good news for our waterways, our wildlife, and our future generations. That's sort of the gist of it, yes?
Yeah, the thing that I think is a really important piece of this legislation is the forest conservation thresholds. And those are the limits of forested area on a given tract that must be preserved before increases in replanting requirements and fees in lieu get triggered. Mm-hmm. And we are the only county in the state to have improved those conservation thresholds above the state minimums. And so I think the county executive had that in mind when he was talking about our being the leader in forest conservation. We also improved the fee in lieu. When a developer can't replant, they need to pay a fee, and we increased the reforestation ratios. So all of the main mechanisms in the bill were improved, and that's nothing to sneeze at. It's certainly
what's missing.
Well, it was just those three. The original bill had higher rates of conservation, higher rates of reforestation, higher rates of fee in lieu payments for anybody that would clear forest on a parcel of 20,000 square feet or greater.
Okay.
Being an environmental advocate, it is my job to push for as much as possible, understanding, of course, that there's going to be a give and take and a negotiation along the way. And so ultimately, as I said at the beginning, I think that this is a positive result that should be celebrated.
Okay. This is for projects going forward. It's not for projects already on the books, or how does that work? Because you know what we're thinking here in Annapolis, right?
Yeah, well, there are a number of developments that are in the pipeline in Annapolis, and of course further afield, but Annapolis has its own forest conservation bill. So, for instance, if we're talking about the Crystal Spring development, otherwise known as Providence Point, that would be subject to Annapolis's law, which is different and more stringent, I would add. But the grandfathering provision of the county's bill exempts from the new requirements all development applications for sketch plans and every higher echelon of approval above that. So if you've put in an application for a sketch plan, that means you've gone to the trouble of doing a forest stand delineation, which means you've identified the areas of natural resources on the site, quantified and categorized them, and described how you hope to preserve them, among a number of other technical architectural drawings and so forth. So, a lot of folks think application for a sketch plan sounds like, raising your hand and saying, I'd like to build something. There's a good bit more work that goes into it than that. And that was actually, the grandfathering provision was a point of contention during the many public hearings on the bill and a lot of back and forth communications between the administration, the council, and other environmental advocates such as myself. That's something that I think, again, a product of compromise like all legislation is going to be. I would have liked to have seen only approved projects be enjoy the grandfathering provision, but you can't always get what you want.
And if you're wondering why Jesse speaks so intelligently about these issues, he was a lawyer before becoming a riverkeeper. So that's one of the reasons why I like having him on as a guest, because he explains it better than I can. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. In the studio with me is Jess Iliff, South Riverkeeper with the Arundel Rivers Federation. November 5th, 2019, post on the Arundel Rivers Federation website, River Reflections and Underwater Grasses. It looks like it was not a bad year, 2019, for the rivers.
No, stormwater runoff is our main concern in the South River and, in fact, in all of Anne Arundel County's rivers and in many of the rivers in the Bay. In fact, it's the only still growing source of nutrient and sediment pollution of the sectors that affect bay-wide recovery.
So when we don't have many storms...
Exactly. When you have a tremendous drought like you did throughout the late August all through September of the summer in 2019, you're not getting a lot of polluted runoff washing into the rivers, and the river responded. It's always encouraging to see how quickly some improvements can be made when people or nature helps people not dump pollution into the rivers for a little while. Because for the past 2 years, what I should say is 2018 and 2017, the South River had no underwater grasses present of the species that is called widgeon grass. It lasts longer than other species that we get in the South River, such as horned pondweed, which is a spring bloom and gone by June kind of species. But the widgeon grass had disappeared in 2017 and 2018, and as you'll recall, they were tremendously rainy years. Both 2018 broke the record set in 2017 and so forth. So even with a 2-year absence of SAV, in one good dry summer, it came back. And what I found to be a bit of kismet was that it came back right next to a project that the Arundel Rivers Federation just completed at Turnbull Estates, which is on the Glebe Bay on the South River, a very innovative living shoreline project that incorporates reef balls for oyster reef as part of the breakwaters that allow the establishment of marsh grasses behind, and will slow the erosion that had been occurring over decades on this long peninsula, and in addition provide habitat for oysters, which have been planted, have already started to grow. That's another good thing about a lack of rain, is that it allows the salinity levels in the river to come back up, and in an estuarine system, you need a lot of salinity out there. South River typically has somewhere around 12 parts per thousand as an average salinity level, and that's what allows the oysters that live in the South River to thrive and multiply.
So oysters and grasses.
Oysters and grasses both benefit, and both of those two organisms provide water quality benefits on their own. As everyone knows, oysters are filter feeders, so they trap nutrients, algae, and so forth as part of their feeding, and they clean the water that way. The underwater grasses prevent erosion from wave action. They dull down the waves, but they also photosynthesize and inject dissolved oxygen into the water, which is required for all of the charismatic megafauna we like crabs and rockfish.
Very good. And then I see on the same post, which was interesting to me, I did not know this, you're going to be working more with CERC.
Well,
and CERC, by the way, is Smithsonian Environmental Research Center.
Yeah, so the Smithsonian has been a tremendous partner since our consolidation with the Weston Road Riverkeeper. The formation of Arundel Rivers has benefited a lot from the partnership with CERC. They have an absolutely world-class scientific lab over there that allows us to do really cutting-edge science that we are not able to do in our little nonprofit shop. And one of those interesting features is DNA source tracking. So at Arundel Rivers, we've historically been able to take water samples and assess the level of enterococci bacteria within those samples, but we can't say whether it's coming from dogs or geese or people or any other warm-blooded creature. But CERC has that capacity. And so that really helps us, because if we can figure out where bacteria pollution is coming from, that's the first step you've got to figure out before you can start stopping it.
And what have you found so far? Or what have they found so far?
Well, that analysis is ongoing. We've done sampling from a couple of bacterial hotspots in the West and Road Rivers, but the Smithsonian, being the good partner that they are, has sort of allowed us to shoehorn those samples into another project that they've got going on. And the deliverable for that project is later, towards the end of the year, maybe in January. So we still have to wait a few months to see.
Well, that's not bad, because I know they do 100-year projects. So this is...
Right, right. Tom Jordan over at CERC has been studying data from the Muddy Creek branch of the Road River that goes through their property for 40 years.
Yeah, so another few months, that's good.
Not too bad. And presumably, whatever the source is will stay the source even over that time period. It's not like there's going to be a leak in a septic pipe, and then it's all of a sudden going to be a flock of geese every day.
Right.
So that's one outstanding benefit that we are able to do with them. But another is...
So they're actually looking at the bacteria to figure out if it's geese poop, human poop, or dog poop, or whatever.
Or anything else. It could be maybe this is the place that the deer like to congregate. Yeah. Enterococci are bacteria found in the gut of all warm-blooded animals, which means mammals and birds. So it could be any of them. But also CERC is helping us to assess the nutrient and sediment loadings in the Church Creek watershed of the South River, which is... First of all, the South River's most polluted tributary, but secondly, in recognition of that fact, the South River Federation and now Arundel Rivers Federation, we have put millions of dollars of restoration work into this tributary. And what that has given us is an opportunity to see how best management practices, these sort of stream restorations, wetland creations, and so forth, we call them BMPs, how BMPs along the same stretch of stream interact with one another, and what different practices do to water quality. Does regenerative stream conveyance take out more nitrite but less phosphate, or does a wetland creation do more sediment capture but less nitrate? And all of those questions. I should mention, when I say we've put millions of dollars, I mean we have managed millions of dollars being generously provided by such donors as the Chesapeake Bay Trust, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Anne Arundel County's Watershed Protection and Restoration Program. Anne Arundel County's WPRP has also managed their own projects in the South or the Church Creek watershed. For instance, if your listeners go to the Annapolis Harbor Center, that decked area by the Pennsylvania Dutch Market that has a big pond overlook where people may have watched turtles, that pond was retrofitted by Anne Arundel County's Watershed Protection Restoration Program.
And the stream behind it?
The stream behind it was a South River Federation project. But yeah, so, most of the large perennial stream segments have had some work done to improve their pollution reduction and improve their habitat function.
We have to take a break. We're going to be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. This is Donna Cole. I'm in the studio with Jess Iliff. He's the South Riverkeeper from Arundel Rivers Federation. There's this period of time when this idea starts to float in whoever's minds on legislation that they would like to see sponsored and go through, where they're not exactly sure what the legislation looks like or all the rules and regulations surrounding it, but the idea starts to take hold, and then the bill starts to take hold around that. And that's where you're at in this in-between ground.
Yeah, this is, and it's an exciting time for me, because this is when environmental advocates get together throughout the state with all their various pet project issues, whether it's water quality like me, or it's climate change like the Sierra Club, or it's plastic pollution like Trash Free Maryland, or whatever the issue might be. Yeah. And we all come together and say, here's what we think we want to push. And there's a voting process, and people get together and say, well, should we go make this a priority or that a priority. And then once you arrive at a priority issue, then the question becomes, all right, who do we find that's the sponsor for this? What's the messaging? Who are the likely opponents? How are we going to, what will the bill actually say? And
so this is how it all works. This is the whole weed, in the weeds.
Every year, every fall, getting ready for the legislative session to kick off in January, advocates, and this is, not unique to the environmental field. I'm sure people who have transportation concerns are doing the same stuff. And so that's why, you've only got 90 days. That's how long the legislative session is to get every bill that every person in the state of Maryland wants to have.
And so summer in the year before, all these ideas are brewing, and this is where this right now is the season where all of everyone's coming together and trying to find their sponsors. What's on your to-do list?
So there are a number of bills that will be coming up during this coming legislative session, the state level, that I'm interested in, several that I intend to work on. One in particular is a ban on the release of balloons for festivities of any kind.
Really? I mean, I'm just shocked because I asked you about this a few weeks ago and you're like, I tried to do it before and it wasn't high on your priority list, but okay, go on.
I floated the idea to the county council. A few months ago, Queen Anne's County instituted a ban on balloon releases, and I wanted to jump on that bandwagon, and so I submitted the idea to the county council and got a very tepid response. But previously, that was over the summer. But there are a couple of delegates and senators who have expressed the willingness to sponsor a statewide ban. Now, it's really just a messaging and PR thing if you think about it, because it's already illegal to litter, and that's all you're doing when you're releasing balloons into the environment. You're littering in a pretty and festive way.
And the people that are up that say no more laws, why are you doing this? Nobody can enforce it. Are you going to get arrested?
I would suspect that it would carry a fine, and probably, if it could be proven that a responsible party had done it more than once, that fine structure would escalate. I doubt that it would come to the level of being in incarceration, but at any rate, so, it's a PR thing. A lot of people, whether it is to celebrate a wedding or to mourn the passage of a loved one, want to do something like that because it does look kind of cool, but in the end, they come back down to earth and they wind up being consumed by aquatic life, and it's often lethal. As you've seen before, sometimes, like an osprey, for instance, will pluck up a bit of that string, or it will get caught in their nest and they'll wind up getting hung by their heads or their feet, and can often be killed by this sort of a thing. And so,
to be fair, I think that was the two that I saw, the rescues that I was involved in. That was fishing line, but same idea. Yes.
Right. You don't want things that will be mistaken for food or that can tangle up wildlife. And so that's one discrete bill.
What else, Jesse?
Well, again, with the disclaimer that these are all sort of nascent ideas in their infancy, there's always, and I bet that if somebody went to the archives down on Rowell Boulevard, they could confirm this, going back to the beginning of our state, there's going to be a bill about oysters, at least one. And some of them are, in my judgment, good bills, some of them are bad. And so oftentimes, the environmental community, we find ourselves playing defense against bills that we think are bad bills. Mm-hmm. And so I expect that there will be some oyster legislation on the table. Generally, there is at least one bill that would seek to reduce restrictions on fishing gear or hours that oysters may be fished for, or adjust boundaries of sanctuaries or other things like that.
Which the water keepers are gonna, go ahead.
That we would view those as bad bills that we would want to fight against, because we put more value, I think, on oysters as mechanisms for cleaning up the bay than as economic engines. Now, don't get me wrong. I was eating oysters last night. I love them. They're delicious, and I will continue to buy them while they're commercially available. But I do think that they should be allowed to do their water filtering work more, and that the state should take steps to encourage their proliferation and not necessarily grease the skids towards their further commercial exploitation.
Jesse, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Donna.
This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We will see you next week.